Hi, I'm back. Did you miss me? In the month I haven't uploaded to this channel, I've been a bit busy, but I've still had more than enough free time to watch an average lifetime's worth of YouTube. In the time I've spent scrolling through my recommended page, I keep seeing videos about a certain F1 driver by the name of Kamui Kobayashi. Now, being the selfish person that I am, I saw these videos were getting a lot of views, and naturally I've decided that the best thing for me to do now is to make a video on Kobayashi, to try and make some sweet cash on the subject. And to be honest, the more I looked into him, the more I found to talk about, so we can easily get to the 8-minute mark on this one. See, I thought that Kamui Kobayashi wasn't all that great of a driver, and I didn't think I was alone in that, but having actually looked through his career results and stuff, I think it was pretty underrated. In fact, given the right machinery, he could easily have challenged for wins. So, how good was Kamui Kobayashi? There's only one way to find out. Kamui Kobayashi was born in the Japanese city of Amagasaki, to the owner of a sushi restaurant. Realistically, nobody watching this video is here for the life story, so let's fast forward a few years to the start of his racing career. He began, like most other F1 drivers, in karts, where he won 4 titles in 7 years from the age of 9. In 2001, he was awarded a scholarship from the Toyota Racing School thanks to his success in karting. This led to his first season in the Formula Toyota series in 2003, where he finished second, with 2 wins out of the 10 races. So, as starts to racing careers go, this was a very good one. In 2002, Kamui moved to Europe and began competing in 3 Formula Renault championships. He came 7th in the Italian series and competed in the German and Netherlands series as a guest, finishing 31st and 15th. Now, these don't sound like good results, but bear in mind that he only did a few races in the German and Netherlands series, so we can't have expected him to score enough points for top 10 in the championship. Anyway, fast forward to 2005, and in this year he won 2 titles, the Formula Renault Euro Cup and the Italian Formula Renault series. Now, the impressive thing about the Italian series was that Kobayashi missed 2 rounds and still took the championship, so this wasn't a bad year at all. He then moved on to Formula 3 the following year, finishing 8th in the Euro Series, 19th in the one-off Macau Grand Prix, and 11th in the other one-off Masters of Formula 3. He came back to all 3 of these events the following year, with 4th in the Euro Series and 13th in Macau. He retired on the first lap of the Masters of Formula 3, but hey, it was a good year nonetheless. Also in 2007, Kobayashi was signed as the 3rd driver for the Toyota team in Formula 1. In 2008, he moved on to GP2, finishing 6th in the Asia Series and 16th in the World one. Now, this was with a DAMS team that was struggling a bit, so again, not too bad. In 2009, he again came 16th in GP2, but over the off-season, he won the GP2 Asia Series. And finally, at the end of 2009, he was signed by the Toyota team for the last 2 races in the season, where he finished in the top 10 for both races, including scoring points in the last race of the season. Now, what Toyota saw in Kobayashi's 2 16th place finishes in GP2, I will never know, but when Glock was injured in a crash in the previous race's qualifying session, they had no choice but to run Kamui. Now, we can't fault the fact that he scored points in his 2 races, and in fact, despite being in his first 2 F1 races, he beat his teammate Jarno Trulli in both of them. That's not just not bad, that's pretty decent, if you ask me. And to make this debut more special, Kobayashi, from Japan, had scored points for a Japanese team in their last ever race in Formula 1. However, this was a bit bittersweet, as it meant that despite the strong start, Kobayashi didn't have anywhere to race the following season. Yet. Sauber, who had just been dumped by BMW, were in need of a second driver, and having seen Kobayashi's 2009 heroics, they decided to put him alongside Pedro de la Rosa for 2010. Now, his first full season didn't exactly get off to a splendid start. After his engine blew up in Bahrain, his front wing came off on the first lap of the race in Australia, causing him to T-bone Nico Hülkenberg, who you should definitely go and watch my video on, by the way. Round 3 in Malaysia brought another engine failure, and then in China, Kobayashi nailed the race start only to find Vitantonio Liuzzi go backwards over his car into turn 6. With 4 retirements from 4 races, none of them through his own fault, this has to be up there with one of the unluckiest starts to a season in F1. However, things would take a brighter turn down the line. Just not yet. After crossing the line for the first time this season in Spain, it was back to the bad luck for Kobayashi in Monaco, where his gearbox decided not to gearbox anymore. He finally scored points in Turkey, coming home in 10th place, but of course when you're Kamui Kobayashi, all good things must come to an end, and so in Canada he jumped over a curb and hit the wall at the race start. Fortunately, this would be the end of a horrendous start to the season, and things started to brighten up, finishing 7th, 6th, 11th, 9th and 8th in the next 5 rounds. It was business as usual in Italy though, and his gearbox exploded on lap 1, as it had made quite the habit of doing this season. In Singapore, Kobayashi made it as far as lap 30 before trying a move on Schumacher which made the German give the wall a little bonk. And then, as a method of revenge, Schumi tried a stupid move on Kobayashi, which put him in the barriers. At his first home race, Kamui brought it home in 7th, and rounded off the season with an 8th in Korea, 10th in Brazil, and 14th in Abu Dhabi. Despite spending more time standing next to his car than sitting inside it, Kobayashi outscored De La Rosa with 32 points to Pedro's 6. Nick Heidfeld was brought in as Kobayashi's teammate for the last 4 rounds, but finished below him in 3 of them, and scored 5 fewer points. So overall, this was a first year full of ups and downs, but to have dominated both teammates in the way that he did was a testament to how good Kobayashi was in an F1 car. And even with his 8 DNFs, only one of them can truly be called his fault, which for a first season isn't bad at all. Granted, Kobayashi did make a habit of crashing a bit in practice sessions, but even so, he was finding the limits in the times it didn't matter, not the times it did. 2011 was a much better season for the Japanese driver, and despite being disqualified from round 1 thanks to a technical infringement on Sauber's rear wings and a couple of retirements in Italy and India, the season was pretty plain sailing. He scored in 9 of the 19 rounds with a total of 30 points to his name. He again outscored his teammate, this time in Sergio Perez, and by 16 points. In a recent interview, Sergio Perez said that Kobayashi was the fastest teammate he'd ever had in F1. Now, admittedly that was said before he was coupled with Max Verstappen, but even so that puts Kobayashi ahead of Hülkenberg, Ocon, and even Jenson Button. And Lance Stroll, but that was sort of obvious. In 2012, he kicked off the season with a joint career best so far of 6th, and then in round 2 his brakes failed in typical Kobayashi form. After 2 points finishes in China and Spain, Kobayashi was caught up in a first lap crash in the Monaco Grand Prix, which resulted in another DNF through no fault of his own. Kamui came back with a 9th place finish in Canada the following race, then Kobayashi crashed into Felipe Massa during the European Grand Prix, which got him a 5th place penalty for the next race. In the German Grand Prix, Kamui came home in an amazing 4th place, and then towards the end of the season he bettered that by finishing on the podium in his home Grand Prix. The following race in Korea though was one to forget, with Kobayashi crashing into Jenson Button and Nico Rosberg on the first lap, and then 15 laps later his car couldn't take it anymore and he had to retire as well. The final 4 races of the season would end with a 14th in India, 6th in Abu Dhabi, 14th in America, and 9th in Brazil. This season was the first in Kobayashi's career where he was beaten by a teammate, although it was close. Ultimately, the Sauber car looked pretty inconsistent, and it was a rare occasion when one driver would score points and the other not. So it's fair to say that Kobayashi and Perez were pretty evenly matched over the season, although Perez made less of a habit of crashing. After the end of the season, both drivers left the team, but while Perez was able to get a drive with McLaren, Kobayashi was less fortunate, so even though he could probably have got himself a seat with a lower team thanks to the €8 million of sponsorship he'd raised, he elected to sit 2013 out. According to Wikipedia, he was focused on getting a competitive drive for the 2014 season, which went well. Now, in 2013, he did a bit of endurance racing, where he took 5th in the 24 Hours of Le Mans and finished 7th in the FIA World Endurance Championship. But even so, this wasn't Formula 1. I mean, neither was the car he'd be driving next year, but at least it looked like an F1 car. And the reason I say he didn't drive an F1 car in 2014 is simple, because the Caterham was a car so slow it would probably be beaten on a bad day by an F2 car. Partnered up with Marcus Ericsson, Kobayashi struggled, with neither of the two being able to score a point, but with Ericsson finishing higher in the standings thanks to a higher average finishing position. It was a really weird and inconsistent season overall, with Kobayashi being dropped for a single race in Belgium, where Andre Lotterer stepped in, outqualified Ericsson, retired on the first lap, and then left again. With the car back at the hands of Kobayashi, he got a highest finish in the last 7 rounds of 17th, and along with those lofty heights there was a DNS and 2 DNFs. Kobayashi was without a drive in the American and Brazilian races because the team was sold earlier in the year without the transaction getting finalized. They therefore went into administration in Russia, which caused them to miss the following 2 races. Caterham and Kobayashi came back in Abu Dhabi, with Kamui's teammate for this one round being Will Stevens. Kobayashi would retire from the race and Stevens came last of the finishing cars. And that was the end of Kobayashi's F1 career. He'd gone from being the fastest teammate Perez had ever raced to finishing 22nd out of 22 drivers who completed more than one race. Now, this dismal season would not be his last in racing, but it was his last in F1. In 2015, he came 5th in the Super Formula Championship, then in 2016, he came 2nd at Le Mans and 3rd in WEC. He also finished 17th in Super Formula, but let's gloss over that one, yeah? He competed in Super Formula, WEC, Super GT, the Intercontinental GT Challenge and the Blancpain GT Series in 2017, none of which he would take a race win in. He then went to Formula E for 2 races where he scored no points, and then in 2018 he came back to Super GT, Super Formula and Le Mans. He again came 2nd with his team in Le Mans, but other than that there was nothing of note from this year. And his career sort of carried on like that. I'm not going to waste your time by reading out every single championship result, because to be completely honest, it would be faster and easier for you to go and do that yourself. But we can at least say that after leaving Formula 1, it was a pretty disappointing career for Kobayashi. I mean, he did also win the 24 Hours of Le Mans, but other than that, there weren't that many good results. So if we go back to the very start of his F1 career for a second, why was it that Toyota were prepared to sign a driver who'd finished 16th in GP2? Like, was there something that they saw and we don't, or was it just money? Well, Kobayashi made quite a bit of a habit of slagging off pay drivers, so you have to assume it was the former, but still, he came 16th. Usually people go into F1 from finishing 1st or 2nd in F2 or GP2, but Kobayashi was 16th. But I think I'm focusing on the wrong stuff here, because the fact is that Kobayashi was a good driver in F1. He was regarded as the overtake king, and he would always be the last to brake when he was side by side with another driver, and although sometimes it didn't pay off for him, more often than not he would get past. This was the reason why, even though his qualifying wasn't a strong point, he would always get the better of his teammates in the race, even if he wasn't the fastest on track. Although his aggressive overtaking sometimes meant he'd hit the other driver, he always seemed to race with respect. Just scrolling through the Kobayashi fan channel I mentioned at the start of this video is enough to show you just how good Kobayashi was at racing. He could go down the inside, round the outside, he could switch back, undercut, you name a kind of overtake, and Kobayashi could do it. I think the reason he struggled so much in the Caterham at the end of his career is because the car was so slow that he just couldn't get to anyone he could overtake. And even if he did, it would be for 14th. And I'm saying all this as if overtaking was Kobayashi's only skill in F1, which is wrong. I know I'm milking this Paris thing now, but if you have someone who can out-qualify Max Verstappen on pace calling you the fastest teammate you've ever had, then you must be doing something right. But yeah, thank you for watching to the end of this video. If you're new around here and enjoyed it, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel. But otherwise, thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think about Kobayashi, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.